journey beyond imposter syndrome. This is where I invite you into a space where high achievers and spiritual leaders converge to redefine success and self-worth. By sharing transformative stories and engaging with thought leaders, this podcast serves as a roadmap for navigating the complexities of imposter syndrome. It's an intimate look into overcoming personal barriers tailored for those who value wisdom, leadership, and intuition in business and life. Join me at the Humble Warrior Podcast with Alani Bankhead. Welcome to the Humble Warrior Podcast. I am your host, Alani Bankhead, and I am really honored to welcome Monica Rivera, who's a personal branding expert at You Wanna Do What? And we already started talking, you guys, and I want to keep this conversation going because it is going to be so good. We've been coming up with these same issues of what do I do until I finally arrive? Like that hustle culture is so insane. So welcome, sister. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll dig into all the good meat.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm a personal brand and communication strategist, which essentially means I help leaders, because we are all leaders, learn how to market their message, tell their story, and build their personal brand so that they can command the attention that they need, not just for their professional success, but also for their business success.
Ooh, I love that. Okay. How does someone like get to this type of job? Explain where you started, how you got here, because you're so confident and so sure. If you guys go to her Instagram, she is, no joke, making magic happen on her Instagram. So how did this all start?
Yes. Oh my gosh, we got to take it way back. So I am a first gen to this country. My parents were born in Puerto Rico and Cuba. And I say that to say that the immigrant mentality is to get a safe job, not to rock the boat, all of those things. And so I was a very rebellious child, meaning I always had these big goals and ideas of things that I wanted to do, always made these declarations of what I was going to be when I grew up. And it was always many different things and very defiant in that way. However, when I reached 16, I had a lot of family tragedy. And so my family passed away starting at 16. So between that age to about 23 and 7 years, I lost my biological family. And so it's an interesting thing because at that point, this rebellious child had the echoes of hearing, don't rock the boat, choose a safe career. And without them really knowing, I just applied that lesson. And so I was very heads down, need to finish high school, figured out how to get into college and navigate those decisions. And I built my entire professional career off of this idea of safety and truthfully of making money. And it was rooted in that because I did not have a couch to sleep on. I didn't have a parents' home to go back to. I knew I had to figure it out all by myself, living in New York City where everything is sky high expensive. And how was I going to do this? I'm an only child. How was I going to figure this out? And so I made those decisions really based on survival and what job was going to pay me the most. So I spent my entire career in corporate marketing. I've worked at a bunch of different companies and business to consumer, all these different spaces. And honestly, I enjoyed it. I loved the marketing aspect of things, but I also felt like I never made decisions just based off of what do I want to do every day? What do I want my life to look like? It was really rooted in how am I going to survive? And if anybody's listening has ever had to make a choice purely off of survival, it's not very fun. And you try to make the best out of it, but it feels very restrictive at times. And I looked at other people's lives and I often thought, I wonder what it would feel like to be in this space. And so even when I think of the name of my company, You Want to Do What? I have always said it with this bite of you want to do what in this very accusatory sort of way, because honestly, the voice in my head was accusatory when I had the idea myself, because I thought, who am I to do this? Just don't rock the boat. And it was still that same mentality echoing even after all of those years. And so I love to hear when other people pronounce the name of the company, because I think, oh, you must have had such a healthy upbringing because you say it in such a positive way. And so I think every day as people, we're trying to really still figure ourselves out.
Oh my
Gosh, that is so amazing. And I cannot wait to dig into this a little bit more. So it's interesting because I'm hearing almost like a before and an after, right? Of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So there, for those who aren't familiar with that concept, it's like a pyramid tool. Recently it's come into debate, but the idea that humans at a basic level, first you need food and shelter and basic security, right? And then you can move up to more intangible. So at the very top is self-actualization. So you can't progress up the scale if you don't have food and shelter and stuff like that. So for you, first you have this foundation intended, right? Your parents did the very best that they could, but unknowingly planted these seeds of stay safe. We want you
Right.
to stay safe.
Mhm.
And that can be beneficial, right? If you're in Maslow's hierarchy and you don't have food, staying safe is I got to get food. But when you live in New York City or in America, which is much more abundant than a lot of other countries, then you can move up that scale. But sometimes that immigrant mentality keeps you down, right? So then corporate marketing, which I think is hilarious considering what you do now, it's like this whole preparation for this journey. And oh, I can't wait to talk more about that pin. We're going to come back to that later. But the fact that you started having this awareness of, I never got to make the decisions I wanted to make. And it just wasn't fun. And so that was the bridge, it sounds like, to get you over to the thriving joy space of first getting curious about what would be fun and what would that feel like. And so, out of curiosity for you, when did that moment happen where your brain was like, you're meant for more than survival?
It's a funny thing that you asked because it wasn't one moment. I think it was an accumulation of many moments, and also always knowing that I've had many interests. So when people say they're multi-passionate, I was multi-passionate at 4 or 5 years old. I literally had the book, which would ask every grade year, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would always have basketball player, Supreme Court justice, hairdresser, literally all under one. And so I'd fill up the lines with the things that I wanted to be, because I always said, why? I'm not going to just choose one thing. And I think often, to me, that's one of a detrimental question to ask children, because it gets them thinking that we have to choose one thing and do it forever, when really we have more of a Cheesecake Factory type menu of options
Yes.
in front of us that's really thick and juicy, and we can decide how to pivot. So I say all that to say that it was an accumulation of moments. I was in my corporate career, and at first I really loved it. I loved everything about it. The people, I loved working even till 1 o'clock in the morning. I loved sitting in the big conference room and figuring things out. And then I moved into different roles, and it went from I really love it to I like it. And then I moved into this is cool. And my if you anybody knows me, this is cool is this very base level of I'm neither here nor there, but I'm moving over into the area where I'm not really having a good time anymore. And then I started to justify it by saying, it's called work. It's not called fun. It's not supposed to be a good time. And so you can see there was this rationalization at every stage as I was losing a little bit of satisfaction in the role that I was doing. And then really what started to happen is I raised my hand for different opportunities at work. And in this one particular company, I noticed that doors weren't opening the same way that they had prior in my career. And there was an opportunity I had to go to Australia. Always wanted to go to Australia. I'm a girl that grew up in the Bronx. This is literally and figuratively the other side of the world, even in my mind. And so I remember all of the paperwork had been done. And then the top manager came and said, you know what, we're really not going to let this happen. But if you want to go to Asia next year, maybe you can do that. But it was just everything, that hope and dream snatched when we had this plan in place and all of these things. And I remember thinking, I don't like this feeling of someone having so much control over my career, in this way of my professional development plan doesn't really mean anything anymore to these people. It really only means something to me. And so I started podcasting 7 years ago. I said I wanted to do something completely opposite of what I'm doing now. So I started talking about personal development. I didn't know jack-ish about podcasting other than I was a fan. And I said, I'm going to figure it out. And what that really did for me is a couple of things. One, it showed me that I could build an entire new set of skills. and that I still had that capability despite the self-doubt that had been creeping in because opportunities weren't happening in my existing career at the time. And two, I started to build my name and my brand in a completely different industry, which was podcasting. So it showed me it is possible to do what I always thought I could do when I was a kid, which was have multiple careers. And that's really how it started.
Oh my gosh, completely full circle moment on having the multiple careers. Holy cow. Okay, so it was a process for you of that curiosity creeping up of what would a different career look like. And one of the things that has been a common theme in the podcast as I have guests come on is their past provides these beautiful breadcrumbs to their destiny. And one of the things that comes up pretty frequently is life purpose. And I'm super curious, do you know what your life purpose is?
I think my life purpose is to teach.
Okay.
Ultimately, I think that's what it is. And I often say when people are stuck and they feel stuck, because stuck in some ways is a choice when we have lots of options. When we don't have options, stuck is a real thing. When we have many options and we can't choose, it becomes a choice. And so for me, I say think back to what you like to do when you were younger, because I do believe, same as you, there are these breadcrumbs that are there. And although our bodies become bigger and we become taller, I still think a lot of the things that we were really rooted in and grounded in and enjoyed still come with us, even though the circumstances around us change. And so I've always loved teaching. I've always loved learning. I've always been very curious. And so I took the things that I learned and I was curious about, and then I teach other people. I'm almost reluctant to just call myself a coach because I really feel it's more of a strategist, because I want to help provide the blueprint for people and have it be a little bit more collaborative in that way, because I have all of this knowledge and I want people to ask the question so I can teach them how to do this, because we need more people just creating paths for themselves and not waiting for those paths to open up, because that's maybe what we've been conditioned to do, or that's how it used to be before. But we're in a completely different world. And I think the more we can take ownership of how much we can create our future and really have belief that we can create our future, that's what I'm about.
Oh my gosh. So I want to connect these dots real quick because this is, I don't want to say it's so typical, but I just love it the way this all comes together. So little you every year is marking a different career that you want every year. And then you end up in corporate marketing, where marketing is about teaching people,
Right.
right? And then you start like getting curious about what else is out there for me. And then you teach yourself how to podcast. And now your whole brand and your whole community and everything is all about teaching. And I want to highlight this example because what we're also talking about strategically is how does the world define success and how do I define success? And so, under that life purpose of I exist to teach people, you have all these amazing things that fit into there.
Right.
Right? Oh my gosh. Okay. So let's talk about the self-doubt. So
Yes.
clearly a very confident woman presents herself right now.
Mhm.
But you mentioned some of the self-doubt that you had leading up on that journey. What did that look like for you?
Oh my gosh. First of all, I think that self-doubt sometimes presents itself externally before it presents itself internally, or before we're aware of it internally. And so I think back to working in that last corporate role. Again, the door is not opening for me. And then also there were reorgs within the company. So the company would have these reorganizations, and then you're a resource. And I understand that it's not personal. But as the roles would change, you would move into a different group that you didn't decide, and it wasn't the role you signed on, but here you are, and job security and all of those things. So you go along with it to get along. And so I started to notice that this self-doubt of, even in the role that I was in, I was very misaligned at some parts. And I started to think, why am I not getting these things? And I'm having a hard time fitting in. And at this point now, I'd worked on a team with all men who were engineers and mathematicians and statisticians. And I'm here, the marketer, kind of wondering how this all makes sense and connects. And so I started to, you could even see it in what I would wear to the office. And so it went from really caring about what I wear to all of a sudden I started wearing black, and everything was always black. Then I started to wear sneakers, like this truly I don't give an F kind of attitude of where now I'm just wearing sneakers to the office. And this was, before everyone wore it and it was a more acceptable thing, I would just wear that. And then I started to notice that if a friend would call me, and because I was always able to do this hybrid environment, if they would call on my cell phone, they would instantly know simply by my hello if I was in the office or if I was home. So they could hear it. And so that's what I mean, that it presents externally in all these ways that self-doubt was showing up for me. I just no longer felt like myself. And if you've ever lit a Christmas tree and you have these string of Christmas tree lights, when the first one goes off, you don't really notice it. But then when you come home and you're like, honey, what happened to the Christmas tree lights? It just starts to dim. And I felt like one light by one light, I was starting to dim. And I knew that was very unlike me. It was just very uncharacteristic to not have this 5-year plan and to lose ideas of goals and aspirations and just feeling like I was going through the motions. And that was really an uncomfortable place for me, of where I started to realize, okay, this doubt is here, but it doesn't really belong here. And also, how much of it really belongs to me versus my environment has changed around me. So it's not that I'm any less capable. It's just now I'm in a foreign place that I didn't choose. So I can change the environment. And so that's something I did.
Ooh, clearly. Yes. Oh man. So the self-doubt that you were experiencing, I know you were alluding to it because you were like, I was on a team of all men. They were engineers, mathematicians, statisticians, that kind of thing. But what was the core thought that was running through your head? Was it, I don't belong here? Or what was the self-doubt
Sometimes,
saying?
yeah, sometimes it was, I don't belong here. Other times it was, I can't do this, or I'm not capable, or why can't I get this? Or how did I get here? That's another way that it sort of came up. So it was this rumination of these circular train of thoughts, with those questions being the most prevalent. And I would try. And so I've always been, again, when we think about the hierarchy of needs and survival, one thing about living at the base level is you become very resourceful. And for me, I would try to figure out different ways to shapeshift and different strategies and tactics to create happiness, to fit in, to learn things, to ask better questions. And I would keep putting all this onus on myself and all this pressure on myself, but still not breaking through. And that was a very tough moment of, then I needed to just be really clear again, how much of this doubt really belongs to me, because the answers to these questions are yes, I don't belong, or yes, I'm not capable, versus no, this is just not the space that you're supposed to be in. And so it was really a rumination of all of those thoughts, some happening all at once, like in one given day, I'd have all those thoughts. And then other times it was more instance specific.
Yes. Okay. Now, anybody who listens to this podcast knows that this concept of self-doubt and imposter syndrome are very layered. So I don't belong here. I can't do this. I'm not capable. Rumination is the worst because you can't control the thoughts from coming into your brain and they just terrorize you. It's just miserable. But underneath the I don't belong here, I can't do this, I'm not capable, there's a why. I don't belong here, why? What was the reason? Was it because you were a woman? Was it something else?
Part of it was because I was a woman. The other part, at the time, I was the youngest. I can't say that in many spaces anymore, but I was the youngest. I was a woman. I was a woman of color. So that was something else that was very different. Also, I had a completely different background. So again, marketing versus the other skill sets that people had. So those were the things that would come up. Also, I have these, I've always been able to connect with people. I love people. I love asking questions of people. And even when I would try to ask questions and find common interests, even then I found myself getting shut down all the time. So all the tools that I had built up to succeed and to build bonds, it just felt like all of them were failing me. And
Yeah.
so when that happens, then you start to think, is it me? Am I the problem?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I don't belong here because I'm a woman, I'm the youngest, I'm a person of color, and I have a completely different background. I'm not in a technical field. That is super common. Mine was, I'm a female, I'm a person of color, I look too young. I was young at the time, and female, I'm too short, I think was the other one. But anyway, so that's like the physical appearance. And then we go to I can't do this. So what were the reasons why your brain was saying I can't do this?
I think it was mostly because I didn't want to do this. So it was, sure, can I learn statistics? And I tried for a while. I did. I tried, read the books, and I tried to take courses, but I say it wasn't my ministry. It wasn't really what I'm most competent in. And I really didn't enjoy that. It felt like it was just not using any of the gifts that I already have, all of the good things about me. I was not using any of those things. And so that part was really something that I started to feel unhappy about. But then what I also did was interesting was I started to really take a step back and say, okay, where can I fit in here? And what I noticed is that the technical people were very brilliant. But when they needed to almost sell or explain to stakeholders what they created, all these blank stares would fill the stakeholders' eyes. And they didn't know, and they would tentatively applaud, thinking, I guess this is great what you just put together, but they didn't understand it. And I thought, at the end of the day, I love storytelling. And so I do understand what the technical team created. I can't necessarily create it myself, but I do understand what they created. And I know what the stakeholders want. So here is where I'm going to create a space for myself using story to explain the tool so that the stakeholders will use it. And so this is where my communication came in, my storytelling came in, and it still didn't win me any friends with the people on the technical team, but at the very least, I felt like I had a little bit more purpose while I was there because there
Yes.
was something that I could do that I was competent in that this other group wasn't. And that was the place that my little corner of land that I owned, if you will.
Yes, that is so good. And for the audience, I know it didn't slip past you that this woman literally tried to teach herself calculus to try to fit in. So there's that teaching life purpose element, right? It's not, it is adapting to the environment, but it's also you're using your core gift to try to alleviate the situation. It's just the environment you were in was no longer suited for you.
Absolutely.
And as soon as you change the environment, psh, so
Yeah.
let's talk about that. Like,
Yeah.
how did that leap look? Like, I want to know everything.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So the leap looked like just showing up for my podcast. So that was one. I said, we're not going to set these big, hairy, audacious goals. We're just going to have this one goal, which is every week you're going to show up and you're going to record this podcast because I knew I would figure it out. And just because of my personality, I would want to make it better and I would want to improve. So that's what I did. I said, I'm not going to have any guests on the show for the first 6 months because I want to get comfortable behind the microphone. I also want to really study so that I can ask better questions. I was really concerned about inviting someone on the show, not conducting a good interview, and then feeling like I wasted the other person's time. And so I really took my time those first 6 months learning. I went to rooms with people that were much smarter than me. I asked all the dumb questions. I had notes on my phone to say, hey, if you have 5 minutes, I'd love to ask you a question. Sometimes they'd answer all of them. Sometimes it would only be one. I'd say, no problem. Thank you so much. And I'd go to someone else. And then I made really bold asks, which was, can I speak on your stages? So I'm here at this conference. I'd love to speak at this next event. Do you have a spot for me? This is what I think I can talk about. There's new podcasters here. I'd love to share what I know. And people really respected that because, again, I did have a marketing background. So I brought with me all of this experience. I just didn't have the podcasting experience yet, but I could still apply how to market a show because I knew how to do that. I knew how to communicate what my show was about. And so I thought, I'm just going to ask. And if people tell me no's never really bothered me before, so I'll just ask somebody else. And people started to say yes. And so within a year, I had a fellowship at NPR. And so I got to learn incredible things working with NPR in this early career program, which was so nuts because at this point I was 20 years into my career, but in podcasting was only 1 year. So early career. And then I would say 6 months after that, I think I landed my first TED Talk. And so that was an amazing thing. And so doors just started to open.
Oh, that's so funny how the doors were closing and then they were opening as soon as you went to the right environment. Oh my gosh, that is so good. So what I heard you say during the leap, the key tools were show up.
Yes.
Just show up, right? I didn't have any big BHAGs, right? The big, hairy, audacious goals. There was none of that. It was, I just need to show up. And out of curiosity, was there an element of I don't know that this thing's going to work out, but I'm going to show up anyway?
Oh, I didn't tell anyone in my life that I had a podcast for the first 4 weeks. It wasn't until episode 4 that I even told my closest friends that I had a podcast. And then I just casually mentioned, oh, I launched a podcast. And I remember them saying, what? And I said, yeah, remember that microphone that I had bought? I actually used it and I have 3 episodes out now and I'm editing the fourth. And they said, what's the name of it? Like they knew nothing about it. And I said, oh, if you want to listen to it, this is where you can find it. And I really just tiptoed into this new space.
Oh my goodness. I love that and think it's super powerful, especially because sometimes when you hear people's success stories, they're like, I had negative equity and then all of a sudden I was a bajillionaire and I have my own island and I went bankrupt 18 times and all this stuff. And for you, it was no, 1% at a time.
Yeah, absolutely.
1% at a time. So showing up, and I heard everything is figure outable.
Absolutely. And ask the dumb questions. Like it's really okay. And it's so okay because it builds that muscle. And the more times you ask questions, it just becomes so much easier. And if there's anything that anybody could take, I believe if anybody listens or watches sports, if you watch baseball and a pitcher has 100 pitches a game before they want to take him out of the game, I say use all your 100 pitches every single day. Literally go to sleep with the ice pack on your shoulder because you've pitched so much, because that shows you're really putting yourself out there and you're really not just working on the business, but in the business and trying to get the eyeballs and trying to get the opportunities. And I'm telling you, I get so many no's even now and it doesn't phase me. I put them in a little folder that I have, okay? And then I'll revisit that. I always see it as no is just a negotiation point, but it's because of those reps of just asking those questions and feeling it's just a not now. I'll figure it out and really believing in myself that I'll be able to figure it out.
Yes. Okay. Now I'm thinking of, I have some clients who are super badass, but they're in that space of it's difficult for me to make the ask because they're worried about the rejection, right? And so it's nice to hear from someone else where it's, no, we want you to fail faster.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the quicker you ask, the quicker you can get the no. That's the start of the negotiation. You can always circle back. They can keep saying no. They can tell you to go pound sand. But
Mhm.
what if you get one yes for every 10 no's?
Right.
Then you want to rack up all the no's because your percentage, your average is going to eventually work itself out, right? And I love the analogy of the swollen or stiff shoulder after all the pitches, because I had used the analogy recently of, I think it was Kevin Durant, a basketball player, right? Who said, I think he's done something like 1,000 shots a day since he was like in middle school.
Mm.
And he has this phenomenal ability to get the ball in the basket. But I'm like, how do you think he got there? There were a lot of shots he threw that didn't make it in, but he got the reps in, and that's why everybody knows his name. So you
Absolutely.
gotta get your reps in, right? And then asking the dumb questions, I especially love that because I think in Western society, not I think, I know, in Western society, we've taken rugged individualism a little bit too far,
Mm.
where we feel like you have to be right all the time. Otherwise, there's something wrong with you. That perfectionism element, which is a behavior and a result of imposter syndrome. But people are scared to ask those dumb questions. And so when I'm working operations and I have someone that's new in the space, I expect you to be asking a lot of things. And if you're not, I'm like, what's this person's deal? Do they lack humility and they're worried about looking stupid? Because I don't need that on my team. I need someone who wants to get to the win as fast as possible. And that means making mistakes. So, out of curiosity, just to maybe soothe the fears of the audience, did you ever ask a dumb question where they just came at you for it?
I don't think anybody has ever come at me, to be honest. I really don't think so. And I'm trying to think, and I would more than happily share it, but I don't think anybody has. But I will say, did have a manager who would go behind my back to talk to my mentor, saying that I didn't ask enough questions. And my mentor said, I know her really well. She's going to ask you questions when she has a question. But first, she wants to try to figure it out. and then she's going to ask the question. So that's just the way that she works. And I remember she didn't like that. She really thought it said something about her managerial skills, which it didn't, but it was just the nature of how I worked. And then I would come to her and I would have, okay, this is what I put together. This is what I have a question on, or can you give me your feedback on it? And it made her feel like a certain way by not asking those questions. But I'm very open. I was a kid that asked a lot of questions. I will be an older person that asks a lot of questions, God willing, but that is really where I am with it. And so I never found that anybody has been rude about it. People have told me no, or people have ignored me. And it's okay, that doesn't feel great. But I will say one of the things is if we take ourselves out of it. So for example, I'm a speaker and I speak probably 30, 40 times a year, whether it's at companies or events or communities. And one of the things is I will get no's or rejections, but I don't think they rejected me. I think they rejected this talk. This isn't a talk that fit their event, for example. Or if I'm working with a client and maybe they schedule a call for us to meet, and then that client decides not to work together. I think, okay, maybe the offer wasn't the right fit or it wasn't the right time. But I try to remove that personalization, one, because it's the business, it's not me, myself, necessarily asking for a favor. These are business transactions, and there's so many different decisions that go into why someone says yes or someone says no that we will never know. And so I try to just remember it's not a personal thing. And as much as I keep reminding myself, then my brain starts to accept that. And so it does feel easy if I don't get, let's say, an opportunity to speak at something I really wanted. I might feel bummed out for a second, but then honestly, I move on because it's a business decision. And I know that if they've never met me, then how could it possibly be personal?
Boom. Oh, okay. So what you're talking about is an alternate interpretation. So whereas a lot of people think they're rejecting me, you're saying, no, that I don't think that's the right interpretation. I think it's just not the right topic for this particular event right now. So guys, that is a fantastic tool that she just offered you. And actually, it reminds me a little bit of the Brene Brown shame versus guilt conversation, where shame is you are a bad person and guilt is I did a bad thing. They're completely different, right? So they're not rejecting you. It's just a closed door for a million and two different reasons, but it doesn't reflect you as a person.
Right.
Oh man, that is so good. Okay.
If I offer something, because you did ask about the question, well, I don't have the answer about the question. I think this could be helpful. Someone had approached me to deliver an RFP for an event, and it was going to be this all-day workshop that I would deliver, and they'd come to me, and it was about personal branding and communication. I was super excited about it. I'd put it together. We got on the phone, had a great conversation, or so I thought. Woman's really excited, and she said, okay, by this date, I'm going to get back to you. No problem. Had gone on vacation, came back excited, like, I really think this is going to work. It's going to be a fun time. And it felt also like a challenge. So this is going to be a fun new project to work on. And so I didn't hear back. And I, of course, sent the follow-up emails and hadn't heard back. And then I received an email getting invited to the event where I was asked to deliver the workshop. And that one, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, they couldn't even take me off the email list. So not only did I not receive a no, I was invited to the very thing and left on the list. And coincidentally, when I forwarded to her and said, oh, it looks like you found someone to go with for this, maybe next time we'll be able to partner together. But even then, notice that it was perhaps next time we can partner together. Then she finally responded, oh, I thought I had replied to everyone. So sorry about that. Now, that one did sting because you never want to find out as becoming an invitee to the thing that you thought you had a chance of leading. So I will say, not necessarily the question, but that one definitely stung.
Yeah. What's interesting is, of course, it makes perfect sense that it would hurt a little bit, but as an outsider looking in, that's a them problem. Right? What poor professionalism do you have that you don't communicate? And sure, honest mistake. Maybe she forgot to reply all, but still that reflects that organization. But sometimes when you're on the receiving end of it, it can be so easy to get in your feelings. Whereas an objective observer can be like, oh, honey, that's not you. You don't even want to work with those people if they're going to do that kind of thing.
Fun part about it of removing the personalization is that they actually went with 4 different speakers to deliver the workshop throughout the day. So even then, when you think, oh, it must have been me, it wasn't, because again, they had asked me and I was going to lead the entire day, but ultimately they decided on 4 different people and 4 different sessions. So again, it just shows that maybe their vision for the event had changed, and maybe that's why I wasn't a fit, and that's why they didn't choose me. So again, trying to remove the personalization out of it after this thing of, oh, I'm invited to the same event, once that wore off, I was able to look at it and say, oh, they just had a completely different vision than what I offered. So it makes sense.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. So thank you for showing your humanity. We always talk about our highs, but sometimes it's just nice to know that someone as successful as you you're human and you experience stuff too. Okay, let's pivot to defining success. Your family growing up was like, success is surviving, don't rock the boat, be a good girl. How do you define success now?
I think I'm still, to be honest, figuring out what that question looks like for me, because as evolved that I sometimes think that I am, I can quickly go back to that first level of the pyramid. There's are times where I can go back to a survival mindset, and it can be something like an unexpected home repair. And it'll shift very quickly of where I can get back to my new normal. But I will notice there will be that instance where I drop into the shut everything down. I have to take care of this home repair. And then I think, okay, let's take a step back and really observe, what does this mean? You have things in place. This is okay. But again, it's a coaching myself through that, because that thought will still be there. And there's a lot of hard wiring in all of us. And depending how deep rooted that is, as it takes some time. And maybe this is always how I'm going to be, but how can I quickly move myself out of it is really what I consider to be the win for myself. So when I think of what success means, I think I still struggle with what that looks like. So in a very immediate way, I will say success. So I have a 6.5-year-old niece. She's my chosen niece, not my biological niece, because I'm an only child. And so success for me is being able to take her on vacations, right? I want her to see different parts of the world. I want her to have different experiences that I didn't have growing up. So I just think showing her opportunities really lights me up. And being able to teach her different things also lights me up. And so I feel really successful when I can take her for summer vacation. And we were over the summer, we had gone to this resort, and they have this foam party, and it's for kids and family and all of that. And she was the most excited person playing in the foam. And then my eyes just filled with tears, and I can feel them now, because that is success to me. Being able to give her that opportunity and see how excited she was, it was one of the most gratifying things I think of my entire life. I think just being able to provide those moments for my chosen family feels like I've obtained success.
Oh my gosh, that is so good, girl. So, what I ultimately heard you say was it was that connection, being able to create that moment and that memory for your niece and for yourself.
Sure.
And you totally reminded me of, so it's just after Halloween at the time that we're recording this. And for me, success, one of the ways I define it now is having the ability to take time to be creative. Because I come from government space, so everything's very rigid and about survival and all this stuff. So I hung up like those floating candles, like in Harry Potter, in my hallway. And I'm proud of that. Like, I took time to do something fun. This is like frivolous. And a neighbor came to drop something off, and her son was with her. And they were like, oh my gosh, what is this? And so I gave him the wand. There's a wand, and you hit the button and they light up. The look of awe and wonder on his face, I was like, core memory unlocked. And that is ultimately, and now we're talking self-actualization on Maslow's hierarchy, the very top, right? But these moments are so magical. Like, we weren't created to just work and die. We are created to be in community. And what I'm hearing you say is, I define success as the ability to create a community, whether it's with my clients, the people I'm called to serve, the family that I choose, of connection, and storytelling seems to be a big theme
Yeah.
for you, and teaching. Part of the taking your niece on vacation, there's a bit of teaching in there of this is what's possible for you if you want it. Now, me reflecting that back to you, how does that make you feel, out of curiosity?
And it gives me the warm and fuzzies, to be honest. It really does. I think for a long time, I wasn't sure if I would have a family, right? Because you lose your biological family, not really sure what that's going to look like. And I just consider myself so lucky to have my chosen family. I'm in the moment simultaneously thinking how lucky I am while the moment is happening, which I think is also very rare to hold those two things. But I feel so fortunate to have that. And my Saturday sleepovers with her are so cherished. And I love it. I give my Saturdays to a 6.5-year-old, and I love it. And it's
Oh,
the best.
I want to come over now.
You're more than welcome. We have the best time.
It sounds amazing. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And so for the audience, defining success, you don't have to have it figured out, but you can identify as you move through life these little moments of, that's success. Right. So I know for me, the first time I realized a success measure was I'd started my business, I think it was about 6 months in, and I have all my energy Monday through Thursday, and I work long hours because I like that. But Friday, I'm like tired.
Mhm.
And so I remember I woke up a Friday morning, 6 months into my business, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. I wish I could just sleep in. And then I was like, wait a second.
You
I
can.
can.
You
I'm
can.
a business owner. And so yeah, those moments of success where Fridays are for cleaning house and doing my errands. So the weekends are for my family. It's not for us to be vacuuming and stuff like that. That's a measure of success. Now, the world defines it differently. It's money, it's power, it's physical things, all of those things. Out of curiosity for you, was there a measure of worldly success that you had to be like, that really isn't me? Maybe I thought it was me, or I was striving for that thing, and you were like, I'm just going to let that one go.
So it's interesting. So I own my home, but I live in a condo. And so there's always part of me that's wanted a house, right? And I've lived in apartments my entire life. And so the idea of stairs that are actually in my dwelling has always been the most exciting thing to me in this very odd, irrational way as the big age that I am right now. But I genuinely have thought of that. But even the decision to not buy a home, I think is one of those things that for me, I just said, I want to be closer to my niece. I know that buying a home will put us further away from each other. And so that's something that I'm okay with not doing, because to everything we have, there's a cost associated with it, not just monetarily, but in other ways, whether it's time, resources, whatever that is. And so that's one of the things that I always thought I would have. But the idea of not being close to her is not worth any home. And so I would say that's one of the big ones.
Ooh, yes. And so what you're articulating is, I call that a values conflict of the relationship with my niece and the desire to have indoor stairs.
Right.
They're both beautiful goals and beautiful values, and they were coming into conflict. So you made a rational, maybe a little bit of an emotional decision, very calculated, right? Of nope, I'm putting my niece above the house. And that doesn't mean the house won't happen down the road. It's just for now, I'm prioritizing this. And
Yeah.
so that is a really great thing to point out for the audience of, a lot of times, yeah, you have good problems, right? Of, man, this is a great concern to have, of which love of my life do I want to invest more in the short term? And there's joy in that, right? We can have gratitude for those opportunities. Okay. Next up, I wanted to ask you about flow state. So when we're in survival mode, right? And actually something I wanted to also mention that you talked about earlier was when you go down to that victim mindset, right? Of, oh, something broke in the house, I have to drop everything. A lot of people view that as like a bad thing, but our bodies are wired to do what's necessary. So when you are in an existential crisis of, oh my gosh, my HVAC is out and it's like -10 degrees outside or whatever it is, your body is going to say anything that isn't survival mode gets dropped immediately. So if you're in that space today listening to this, I want you to honor that part of yourself and not judge it, because it's there for a reason. And often that self-doubt pushes us to excel and produce because that's what it tells us we need to do, right? And so when we get to the opposite end of the spectrum is flow state. So you're so aligned, you're so trusting, and whether you call it the universe, like whatever, like all the magic is happening around you. The easiest way I describe it to folks is runner's high. You're like mile 7, 8, and all of a sudden people are like, this is so easy and it shouldn't be, and I could go forever. It's irrational, but it's easy and flows. So have you ever experienced something like that where you were just so aligned in time, all this time passed and you're like, man, I felt like 5 seconds?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So there's usually two places specifically. So I've already shared, it will be no surprise. The time with my niece always feels like a flow state. We always say time flies when you're having fun. And so we just have a good time with each other. In my business though, I will say there's these moments where it feels like, if anybody's ever watched the Fast and the Furious movies, where they press that little NOS button and then NOS button just catapults the car. This is flow to me, which might be totally different than how other people think of it, as this very serene, calming experience. For me, it's this going lightning fast, completely safe, but so honed in and focused on what it is I want to do. And so I would say when I'm pitching, I'm very much like that. When I'm putting out proposals, when I'm applying to new things, when I'm sending up the follow-up messages, and I'm just in this state of boom, that feels very electrifying for me. And so that is all the time can pass by. And it just feels like no time has passed, because that is when I feel like, yes, we are moving things forward. Good things are going to come. And I'm really in this belief of all of these seeds planted right now are going to bear fruit. There's not a doubt. I don't think of it that way. It just thinks my job is to do this and to pitch. And once I do my job, then the universe will do the rest of it.
Oh my gosh, that is so good. And I love that we're talking about this because, again, if you're in self-doubt, imposter syndrome, survival mode, the idea of fun is not on your radar. You've mentioned fun probably 3 times already during this recording. And so out of curiosity, obviously time with your niece, you can manufacture that. Saturday sleepover time, right? It's going to be a good time. I'm in my flow state. But when you started in the business, you were like, I didn't know what I was doing in podcasting, and you had to figure it out. So at what point did pitching become fun, where this NOS button got hit? Was it immediate, or did it take time for you to get there? What did that look like?
I think fun just became actually doing the things I wanted to do, just really enjoying those parts of myself and making the decisions. I will say this, it's probably more this. Being able to make the decisions I want to make when I want to make them is very fun for me.
Oh, can you say that one more time? Because we got to say it twice.
Being able to make the decisions I want to make when I want to make them is very fun.
Oh my gosh, yes. And we touched on this right before we got on, but for those folks who are starting their journey of entrepreneurship or something else, right? You're seeing her at this point where she's, yes, I make my decisions when I want, and it's fun. But when you're starting it, sometimes you have to do what you have to do in order for you to get to that point of doing what you want to do and making it fun. So how would you encourage, or what would you share with someone who's just at that very beginning journey where they're like, I want to make the decisions I want to make, but I can't right now?
I would actually pose a reframe, because you are. So at that point, we're looking at it at the micro level. And so this is in the very tiny, right, close-up view. But from the macro level, you are making the decision you wanted to do. Because if you are choosing a business of your own and building that business, you did make that decision. So even the parts like, I don't love administrative parts, like I am not having fun when I do that. But when I roll up to say, but look at what I get to do because of this business, it's just send the damn email, just send the contract over. I know you don't love it, but I'll tell myself, just get it done and then it'll be gone. And that's moving my business forward. And so I just remind myself the business itself is fun, even if not every single component of it always is, I try to remind myself of that. And so when I'm in the administrative state, I'm constantly thinking, I'm going to get someone else one day to do this, and that's going to be the thing that I do. But it's still, I get to do this, and my business is fun.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. I'm definitely, it's been years since I've been in this mode, but I'm like, I don't do anything if it's not fun. Right. Like, and I remember, to your point, doing my bookkeeping and being like, oh, this is so draining, and fantasizing about the day when I could throw my money at a bookkeeper because I was bringing in enough revenue, right? And that's fun too to me. I'm really big into partnerships and community. And so the fact that I could partner with another business that I believe in to say, let's create a mutual win, that's fun to me. Oh my gosh, that is so good. Everything is just, it's fun. It's a game. If you can gamify it, now it's a game changer. Oh man, that is so good. I could seriously talk to you for forever. Okay, so we're wrapping up here. Out of curiosity, what part of your story are you proudest of?
To be fair, and I know we're trained to be humble, but I'm really proud that I'm here because there were so many things against me. This was improbable for me to speak on the stages where I've spoken. I just recently spoke at the same company where I started working when I graduated college. I then delivered a keynote at that same company underneath my own company's name. I'm really proud of that, but more so because I know the girl that I was when I first entered those doors when I was only 21, and I had so much pain. I had so much grief that I was carrying, so much uncertainty. I was so rough around the edges. I was as Bronx as could be walking into the door, not knowing anything about corporate and how to navigate these spaces. I would say things that would rub people the wrong way, but truly because I didn't know how to master diplomacy yet. I hadn't mastered communication and all of those things. So when I just think of who I was and how, I don't know if people would have thought that I would be able to build this business or deliver these talks or try to serve people at this level. I'm really proud of myself for not folding. I remember as a teenager, I was asked, I had a boyfriend at the time, it was like, let's just get married. And I was 17. It was like, let's just get married and have a family. And there's nothing wrong with that. But also, I bet on myself, right? I know I don't have necessarily anyone to take care of me, but there was something about feeling, I think I got this. I think I can try to figure this out on my own, even though I didn't know at all what it was going to look like. So I'm really proud of who that girl was and the woman I've become.
Oh my gosh, that is so good. And so just to highlight what you said is nobody's coming to save you, listener, right? Like you got to save yourself, and you are the best investment. Zero question. Zero question. Okay, I lied. There's one more kind of big question I forgot about that I'm dying to know the answer to. So you mentioned in the very beginning, things were good, like you were having fun in your corporate job, and then the doors started closing. And then when you put yourself in a different environment, the doors started opening. Spirituality is a big component of this conversation because faith and trust are spiritual components. They're things you don't have evidence for, right? How did you attribute, now that you have this hindsight, do you have a certain interpretation on like why certain doors were closing, or how would you explain that?
So I hope the listeners stay with me here because this is a big thing that I've been thinking about even more recently. And for a long time, I would consider myself an orphan, right? I didn't have any parents, any family, and that's the label that I had placed on myself. And I remember I would jokingly say to some people, families that were really happy and healthy together, oh, if you ever want to adopt me, as a joke, right? Because I really struggled for a long time to find a place and wanting that connection and feeling like this untethered balloon, this helium balloon that was just floating through space. And recently I was with a collection of women, and I was in a Bible study, and there was a verse about when did you know that you were a child of God? And it was such a simple question, but I had never really considered that maybe I wasn't an orphan after all. And maybe there was always, even if I didn't have the faith that I do now, because honestly, I wasn't praying, I wasn't reading the Bible, that I was just surviving in the way that I knew how, which was all in my head, not anywhere else. I think truly I was always covered. And I believe that our purpose happens even if we're not aware of all the invisible strings that are helping to lead us there. So that's the way that I would categorize it.
Yes, I love that for so many reasons. And for the listener, I'm very sensitive about where people are in their spiritual practice. And even if you're an atheist or something, like your soul, your intuition, whatever you want to call it, right? That thing you don't have proof that exists, that spirituality to me. The fact that you have that hindsight to be able to say, I don't have evidence to support this, but I believe in my bones that even when I wasn't invested in that relationship with my higher power, that higher power never abandoned me, that I was always cared for and loved on. And as soon as I decided to take that label of orphan off and put on the label of child of God, now I'm not an orphan anymore, and I never was.
And
Oh my
I
gosh.
did, I was reluctant to say the Bible study because I want to be sensitive to people that are listening as well, because I'm not, uh, it's just for me, and whatever anybody believes or doesn't believe is completely for them. But this is just my story and sharing my story, and even just take the parts that help you and leave the parts that don't. But I just hope that I really do believe that we are all walking in our purpose, even when it feels like we're not.
Yes, absolutely. No, all the listeners of this podcast know we're very respectful of viewpoints, but the story is the thing that shines. And your interpretation is so beautiful because we do feel lonely so often in this world, right? Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us. I'm hugely encouraged by your story. Now, I did hear that you have some stuff coming up. Would you like to share a little bit about that with the audience?
I do. So I think a big part of us as business owners is the need to get leads and more eyeballs. And just one of the most effective ways I found to market our products, our services, ourselves is through speaking. And so I'm offering this brand new service for the first time, which is a signature talk boot camp. So in 6 weeks, we build your signature talk and I teach you how to actually market that talk. And this is to help you, one, get brand awareness, also get some lead gen for yourself, and then really be able to communicate your story. Because I think regardless of what space you're in, whether you're listening to this as a corporate professional, a government professional, a business owner, being able to articulate your own story and get that message across is one of the most powerful things. And it is the number one differentiator you're going to have over the next person. Your credentials can look exactly the same, but your story and how it's been impacted by you will not be the same. So if this resonates, then I invite you to check out that program. I'd love to help build that story with you and show you your brilliance, because often we don't see how brilliant we really are.
You guys, we will include the link for that in our show notes so you can access that. But this is coming from the woman who spent 20 years in corporate marketing, has successfully built her own marketing and branding business, multiple TEDx talks. So, guys, does she walk the talk? 100%. Living proof here. This is the person you want to learn from. And so I hope if you're interested in getting on stage, please do it. I will tell you, as a keynote speaker myself and a TEDx graduate, being on that stage is the easiest and fastest way to get sales for your business because people can see you, they can feel your body language, the terms you use, right? Whereas in sales, it's the rule of 7. If you're online, it takes on average 7 contacts before they can build trust, all the things. Guys, do her signature talk boot camp. If you're curious, you are worthy of the investment. Please don't let finances be the thing that stop you. She's phenomenal. Sister, we're also going to include the links to your Instagram and LinkedIn accounts if you guys want to connect with her on those platforms. Thank you so much, my sister, for being here. If you guys are looking for more resources, check out my life purpose exercise freebie on my website at mightysparrowcoaching.com. I have video prompts to help guide you, or you can check out my best-selling book, The Least of Us, How Your Imposter Syndrome Points to Your Greatest Power, available at all major book retailers. And you guys, until next time, humble warriors, please remember, the world needs who you were made to be. Thank you for joining us today on this journey to discover how you can harness your self-doubt to work for you. I love you guys. See you soon.
If you enjoyed this episode and would like some help overcoming your imposter syndrome, check out the free life purpose exercise on my website and subscribe to my blog. If you already know what your life purpose is and are ready to crush or harness your imposter syndrome, then you're going to love my best-selling book, The Least of Us, How Your Weakness Points to Your Greatest Power. Available on Amazon and all major book retailers. Or you can hit me up at alani@mightysparrowcoaching.com to discuss private coaching or corporate and government training. That's ALANI@mightysparrowcoaching.com. Listen, there's only ever been one you, and there will only ever be one you. And you have a specific gift to give that the world desperately needs. Don't let your self-doubt be the thing preventing you from living your most joyful and impactful life. Until next time, I'm always cheering you on.